heterosexual community does, or not doing the exact same things the heterosexual community does. But if you got one group who says, we don't do this, and you got another group who says, oh, we do this and more, that's not equality. That's licentiousness. And I've thought that's not what this was supposed to be about.
Absolutely. It's literally the same argument with the feminists. And ironically enough, the lesbians don't even want to be included in the whole acronym anymore because their identity is being erased by the trans people. And it's like, well, you kind of did it to yourself, didn't you? I mean, this is what you were fighting for, but now these unearned benefits that you were saying you're cool with not getting because it's not equal and you want things to be equal. Well, things are very equal, and now we're running into men saying that they make better women because of how hard they had to fight to be a woman. The fuck is, I'm sorry. What is that? I don't know what that is, but confusion and abuse. And right, we're not banging on that. We're not, I have love for Black people who are on code, and I have um thoughts for Black people who are off code. And I think that um, our teacher, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., teaches us that it's better to be simple. You know, once you start trying to be complex about things, you start skipping things. You know, you don't get the answer to the first question, and because you're moved on to the second question. And we've got a lot of people with unanswered questions, but they're out here thinking that they can solve the problem, and they can't. They can't. That math doesn't really make sense. They haven't put enough time into it. But if you put more time into it, then maybe you'll realize that they haven't given you the answer because they don't want you to succeed. And I know that they don't want us to succeed. They want us to be a permanent underclass. And I see it all the time with how legislation gets drawn up and we are always accepting crumbs. Or not even accepting crumbs, but just they're like, here's some crumbs off the table and be happy with it because we didn't have to give you anything. And there's a whole group of Black people who are fine with that. I don't know what that is. I've never been fine with just accepting less than what I'm owed.
That's people who are just happy to be in the room. They don't care if they happen to be sitting in the back. Hell, you can have them sitting in the toilet all night. They don't care, just as long as they feel like they're somewhere around. Well, we're not supposed to be the pets of white supremacy. We're not supposed to be their little dogs, their team mascot, which is what people like Clarence Thomas want to be. That's what people like Tim Scott want to be. That's what people like Joy Reid want to be. And that might be good enough for them, but it's not good enough for us. And so we're not looking for crumbs, especially when we were the ones who baked the doggone cake.
That part. That part.
But this is what we got. We have people who are telling us, we shouldn't be too greedy now. We shouldn't be doing too much. Man, to hell with that. The only time we've ever gotten what we're due is when we decide to stop playing Mr. Nice Negro. And that's the problem, of course, because let's be honest. We have way too many Black folks, some of them who we allow around us, who have gotten every crumb of their daily bread from white supremacy, and they're just playing the game. That's why I point out people like Big Bird, because we want to create a hostile environment for these agents. We want to make it where whenever they come around, people are looking at them. It's not just a matter of giving them the side eye. It's a matter of telling them you can't be here. Because with every other group, if they got some interloper who comes among them, they are not at all bashful about making it clear you can't stay. And if you refuse to find your way to the door, they will show you the door, face first. Now, when we decide that we're going to have zero tolerance for these fools, that's when they're going to start disappearing. It's not enough for them just to be a little leery of coming around. They need to look and understand, okay, we can't come around at all. Instead of them playing this game of, oh, we're just going to tap dance. We're going to tap dance. No, you don't come around here dancing at all. So instead of telling you to tread lightly, tell them don't tread, period. And that's how we start to change the situation. In the last 18 months, I've tracked some encouraging signs. It's not conclusive, but it's indicative. I noticed that we've been the ones who have been putting forward a substantive counter effort to start pushing our talking points. You got the white supremacists who are now complaining about the things that we're seeing, the things that we've been saying online. and also the things that we've been doing. That means that what we've been doing in the offline world and the online spaces have been reaching the bastards. They've actually been able to see it, and it's making them uncomfortable, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But this is just a good start. We've got to intensify our efforts. We got to have that hardcore of Black people who are going to be the ones pointing the way for everyone else. Because when you have enough Black folks who are on code and organized, because of how horribly dysfunctional most Black folks tend to be, then what's going to happen is they will fall in line. But we're going to have to show the persistence. Because unfortunately, we've been consistently inconsistent. And then we got people like Jim Crow Joe Biden and people like nigga Jim Clyburn and all these other bad actors. They take advantage of that. As soon as they see us lit up a little bit, as soon as they see a few of us grumbling and going, oh, we didn't get what we're supposed to get in 5 seconds flat. Okay, I guess we might as well quit. As soon as they see that, they will seize on it. But the reason that they haven't been able to make any inroads among us, they haven't been able to make any headway among us, is because we have an iron rigid rule about staying on code. And that works. That is the only thing that works. But it's the one thing that too many Black people are looking for a way out of it. They're hoping that maybe we can get empowerment in 30 minutes or less before the next commercial break, or hopefully before the NBA final series is over. And I'm sorry, folks, but empowerment doesn't work like that. Empowerment is something you have to want every day, something that you are putting in the work for every day. I try to live that in my own life. That's part of the reason why I decided that I was going to be doing these little daily briefings 6 days a week. It was important to me to live by example.
Absolutely. Uh, Look, so checking the paperwork, saying halt, who goes there, that has become a favorite pastime of mine. Delineation, at least for us, is new. I don't know that I heard my family or people around me speaking like how we've been speaking recently ever. And I think that there's a wealth of information available to us, but people don't use it or they don't know that it's out there. Like, for example, the color purple that is coming out or came out or whatever, the new one, the director is a Ghanaian named Blitz Bazawuli. And Ghana has pretty harsh gay laws. And to me and other people who've checked out what it looks like they're trying to portray, it just looks real gay, Professor. I'm sorry. It's given this like sisters rule the world, we run the world, we can do everything together, but you can't really do anything without the man. So what are they really trying to say? And at least in the original, I don't know, it wasn't so blatant, I guess. And I just think about people who come from areas that aren't as accepting of these proclivities. They come to here because we actually fought for the right to be stupid. Um, what I mean by that is integration. I don't know, loving versus Virginia. Fighting for the right to be with people who hate you just seems backwards to me. But I didn't exist in that time. I don't really know what the struggle was, if there was one, or if people just wanted to justify some backwards behavior with some legislation, or if white people really are as conniving as people would like to believe, as in they know that they're a dying breed and they'll have to exist in some way or form, one way or another. So, intermingle with the native population and, 1 + 1 = 2. Now they're in control of the resources. They've created a buffer class and the original people aren't there anymore. And it's hard to say that that's not what happens when you can look at history and see that that's been their playbook every time they go and conquer somewhere. But we've been a people who have been unconquerable. We've always been fighting back. So I guess outside of like North Sentinel Island, where they didn't even allow them to come over there, it's just us. And then people are fighting to come here. I mean, literally hanging on the wings of the airplanes and hiding out in storage on tops of cars. I've seen some crazy videos, and people would risk life and limb to come here and benefit off of our plight and struggle and everything that we fought for, but they won't fight at home. They don't care about home but they're supposed to be this elite group of people, right? They're coming from this grandiose place, but they have to come take ours and bring it back home. I don't know, that doesn't really make any sense to me either, other than we've accepted some bullshit and now it's time to course correct. And it might get uncomfortable for people, but what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to just accept it.
Oh, sister, you are waving that red flag in front of the bull. I have to rein myself in when you say things like that. But I'm just going to come straight up the middle and call it like it is. It is a failure of character that leads one to flee their homeland. That is a failure of character. Because if you're not willing to stand on the very soil that your forefathers and foremothers stood on, bled, and died on, if you're not willing to fight for that, then you're a liar if you claim that you're going to fight for a patch of land somewhere else on the other side of the globe. You will not. I think that it was Mr. Harvey, Superboy223, who said, well, you guys know him by his name, Your World on YouTube. I think he said it best, that America was founded by thieves, slaves, and opportunists. And it's pretty obvious which is which. But to get back to the whole color purple piece, everybody knows Steven Spielberg was the one who directed that film. And you had a white man who wrote the so-called screenplay for it. It reminds you of that movie, The Woman King, doesn't it? You got these white women writing that mess. And if it's supposed to be all about how great feminism is, such a wonderful feminist piece, then how come they didn't do that with Wonder Woman? How come they didn't have a group of white women, show them getting into a war and they're fighting with their men, and show these white women who are fighting for the colonizers, fighting for the slave masters, show them doing that mess? But they don't, because this is about image training. It's about showing you constant images of black men and black women at each other's throats. This is the reason why I constantly tell people that the folks who own and control the media, they're not in the business of entertainment. They're in the business of mind control. And entertainment and news are flip sides of the same coin. You're either watching one or the other. But most of the time, most people spend their time watching entertainment. So what you see in the so-called entertainment is what the white media puts the most interest into crafting, into shaping and molding, and injecting all of their little messages into it, because they know that's what you're going to spend most of your time watching. So what happens is you have so-called entertainment that teaches societal roles. It teaches the role of the white person is the lead. The white person is the most important person. The white person is the person who all the events happen to center around. They're the person who is the most important, and everybody else is there to help them out. They're the person who checks everybody else, especially black people. Haven't you ever noticed with a bunch of so-called dramas and comedies and even cartoons, you'll have white characters who are basically checking the black characters or even lecturing them about something or another. I mean, they use these as very subtle ways to sneak that racist mess in. And that's why you don't see me watching much of that mess. Because I don't believe in indoctrinating myself with this inferiority complex that white supremacy tries to saddle us with. But that's what a lot of our children grow up on. We just park in front of the television and we don't actually monitor what it is that these white media outlets are putting into these kids' heads. And then we wonder why it is that they're not challenging power. We wonder why it is that they will take a subordinate role to or kowtow to some white classmate or some white supervisor or whatever. It's because they've been indoctrinated through that. Indoctrinated several hours a day through television. And now we have the color purple, which I guess is going to have some sort of intersectionality involved. All of these things they keep putting out. Every time they have some LGBT character or trans character, it's always a black person. You had that Buzz Lightyear movie. They had to have a black woman as a lesbian. And they're going to be having some other shows. It's going to be a black person as a transsexual. And these are not things that the black community said we want to see. What we said is we want to see affirmations of the black family. You don't get the black family from lesbian relationships. You just don't. You don't get the black family from transgenders. You just don't. But that's what they're pushing on us.
Absolutely. America is headed to hell in a handbasket. I've read that tweet so many different times in so many different ways, and it's often by blacks who aren't even from here. They're from somewhere else. And I'm just like, look, if you don't like it here, you can carry your ass. Like literally, I made a whole GoFundMe, like off code, gotta go. I will help you get to where you need to be because clearly you are mistaken that you can come over here and talk with such I don't even know what it is. They just have the balls to say this types of things around us and expect there not to be any consequences for their treason. Like you said earlier, they're not going to come fight for us. They want to come here and fight us. They want to replace us. And not just the black immigrants. I'm talking about all of them. Everybody who's not from here is trying to come here and take what's ours. And we've been, I guess, a people who have been asleep or comfortable, or maybe, here's me playing devil's advocate. Maybe we're just so comfortable knowing that we've been here and that we'll always be here, that we'll just let them phase out. Like we'll just let global warming happen, and everything that's not supposed to be here will shrivel up and die, and we'll still be here because we're supposed to be here. And then, things will reset. But I don't want to hope and wish that nature takes its course. I want to be a pusher of events. I don't know. I feel like we are at an optimal time to do what's necessary. And I think that maybe before I was here, before I was born, maybe in civil rights time, we were very close to getting what's owed to us. But for whatever reason, I'm sure well, I know you're way more knowledgeable in this area than I am, but for whatever reason, Black people accepted symbols and not tangibles. And I talk to people, and it seems like when they started taking out our thought leaders and our people who had something to say for us, by us, people didn't want to speak up anymore. Like they got scared.
One of the big problems that we had that came out of the civil rights movement, we got to be honest about this, is that too many black people were simply looking for a horse to hitch their wagons to. I guess they figured it was like some sort of socio-ethno-political sporting event. You find a strong horse like a Malcolm or a Medgar or a Martin or whomever, and you cheer them on. Everybody cheers them on and says, yeah, you're right. That's the man. We're going to support this guy. You're the one. And then what happens is, I guess we figure we're going to ride that horse to glory. And it doesn't work that way. Racism is a group sport, but so is black empowerment. Everyone has to put their shoulder to the wheel. Malcolm could be a spokesperson, but he could not be the leader of it. That's the reason why we have been absolute in our assertion that the code is the leader. The code is the one that we follow. And that being the case, only black folks who really don't want black empowerment are going to sit around saying, well, what about how we're going to be following? I mean, someone needs to tell me what to do. It's amazing how many times we hear people who are saying that as a cop-out. I remember when TBA did his first documentary, 7 a.m. He had, after the screening, had these meetings with the people who had just seen it, and he was live streaming with them, talking to them. You actually had one of these people who was in the room, a room full of black folks, and this woman actually asked, well, what do you do if you live in a place and you don't have people you can build up? What do we do if you don't have people that you can build with? And I'm thinking, she's in a room surrounded by hundreds of other like-minded, rock-ribbed black empowerment advocates. And she's asking, what do I do if I can't find anyone to build with? Now, the problem with someone like that is not that they can't find anyone to build with. It's that they're looking for an excuse not to build. They're looking for a reason to say, I can't do it. Or I'll get behind somebody else and let them do it. That ain't going to work. Every black person needs to do what empowerment demands. Empowerment demands sacrifice. You're not going to have someone hand empowerment to it. You're going to have to take it. And truth be told, after everything we've been through, we should be glad for the opportunity to put some pain on the enemy. We should be glad for the opportunity to elbow our way into the proceedings and show everybody just how rude we can be. We should be proud for that. Unless your mind's been put to sleep, unless your spirit's been put to sleep, unless your soul's been put to sleep. And if that's the case, well, in that case, then white supremacy will not give you a comfortable place to die, but it will give you a place to die nonetheless. And you know what? I'm fine with that. I think that what we need is a return to people seeing harsh consequences for what happens when you don't fight white supremacy. Why was 2020 such a pivotal year? Why was that a seminal moment in recent history? It was because you had a dyed-in-the-wool white supremacist in the White House. And with the COVID lockdowns, you had people with no way that they could escape the reality of what they were seeing. Police murdering black people in the streets, you had folks backs to the wall, and they had a choice. You can either fight white supremacy or you can wait until it kills you. And people got up and they fought against it. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm actually hoping that Trump wins. I'm hoping that DeSantis wins. I'm rooting for DeSantis 2024. And the reason why is, let's be bluntly honest, most folks, they are not actually going to get up and fight for their survival unless they have no other choice. And that being the case, I'm cool with that. Let these white supremacists leave them no other choice. But for those of us in the black grassroots, we better circle the wagons. We better make sure that we are prepared. And we better make sure that we got each other's backs. And that means no excuses. When it comes to other groups, if they, as Dr. Claude Anderson said, if they do not have a community, they make up their minds that they will establish one. They don't sit around saying, but what if I cannot find any other Vietnamese to build with? Or what if I cannot find any Greeks to build with? Or what if I cannot find either this or that to build with? They don't make excuses. They don't try to look for a way out. See, that whole failure of character thing, that's a sword that cuts both ways. And you got a lot of black folks, including those who ought to know better, who are looking for an easy way out. They like the idea of black empowerment. They're intrigued by the idea of black folks being in control of our economics and our politics. But when you start telling them, hey, we're going to have to start building up our groups along our own lines, and that means you can't be watching so much TV. And that also means that you're going to have to get some sweat on your brow, get some dirt on your hands, and you're going to have to do some stuff that you're not accustomed to doing. Then all of a sudden, they're looking for a way out. Ooh, that's too hard. Give me a break.
By any means necessary. That's what our ancestor, Elder Malcolm, said. And I'm learning that the racist white supremacists, they thrive off of our emotions. You know, they want you to tell them how you feel all the time. That's what these platforms are for you to just dish how you feel. Not a lot of people are using it how the new black media uses it to share information, news you could use in real time. But I appreciate the example. I mean, for real, like, I definitely slip up often because I have a petty demon inside of me and it wants to come out a lot, especially when people are confused. Uh, the confusion in our community is angering because I don't really think that they're confused, Professor. I just think that they're comfortable, and I think that cowards are comfortable, and people who know what is necessary, while they might not like what they have to do, they're not afraid, you know. And I think that once once you start adding up what works and what doesn't work, and you realize that you looked foolish for slapping that vote blue no matter who on your Facebook profile picture. You know, you look stupid that you voted for Obama, even though you knew that he was not going to do anything for you. Nothing about him screamed, Black people, I got you, as much as he was very specific about everybody else and how he was going to help them. I think that we are an emotional people and they know it. But I hope that conversations like this spark people's logic, you know, that their intellect is tickled and it makes them want to do it again, you know, like, oh shit, what did I do to have that thought? And maybe that thought leads to some action. Um,
Yes, what you're saying is that we're supposed to be examining our behavior. And that's exactly what we should be doing. You're not going to root out any sort of impurity or root out any sort of disease unless you decide to get serious about separating what should be there from what shouldn't. The problem that we got when it comes to these coons, tethers, when it comes to these backbiters and backstabbers, is that they're making a calculated risk. And the risk is that hopefully black folks are not going to get empowered, and that way white supremacy will continue to feed them and continue to protect them. That is the calculation that they're making. That's the math. That there's going to be somebody or some sector of white supremacy that's going to keep feeding them no matter how off code they are. And that's the reason why whenever an Omarosa gets booted out, or whenever somebody like Michael Steele gets booted out, all of a sudden they start talking like they were the second coming of Jesse Jackson. Well, Jesse Jackson, we had something resembling sense. But that's what happens with these people. If they feel the white supremacy can't protect them, they start trying to cop a plea. Now, the only thing they've got working in their favor, at least for the moment, is We are not yet in a position, nor we organize ourselves to make sure that once their white supremacist benefactors are no longer feeding them and protecting them, that it's finally time for them to face the music. We are not yet at that point, but we're going to get there, and we need to get there. Every other group, they make it very much a part of their culture that you cannot wrong them without having to have some sort of price leveraged. You look at these other groups, whether it be in the United States or international, look at the Middle East, look at South America, look wherever you want to look at, you wrong these groups. What's happening is they're going to make sure that you pay for it. You're not just going to hear about it, you're going to pay for it. And that's because they do not take their dignity lightly, they don't take their lives lightly, and they do not take the well-being and the future of their children lightly. And that is what we are attempting to establish, a hard-nosed, rock-ribbed standard that is what we're going to be doing. But that's going to take time for that kind of thing to establish itself and take root. Because if people have an opportunity to go back to the same old, they're going to do that, unless we make it where they can't. And that's the reason why we have these little gatherings like this. And let me tip my hat to you, Sister Eve, because I've seen people like you, Brother Tari and Rain, the younger cats who are out there. You guys are the next generation of what it is that we're setting in motion. Back in the day, you had Dr. John Henry Clark and others. They talked to the black baby boomers, and the black baby boomers weren't trying to hear that. In fact, I remember one of the last lectures that Dr. William Mackey gave shortly before he died. And he was somewhat, I don't want to say that he was depressed, but he was disappointed. And what he said was that because of the fact that the black baby boomer generation, he didn't name them by name, but you knew he was talking about it. He said that because that generation had not picked up the baton to run with it, it would be another 20 years before any sort of black empowerment got moving again. Now, he gave that statement back in the late 90s. When was it that the new voices of black media finally came to something resembling prominence? Around about 2015. I've been on YouTube since about 2007, but still, it took a while. Dr. John Henry Clark said it best: revolts and revolutions take on average 10 to 20 years to build steam. So our elders, our grandmaster teachers, they understood the principles of what happens when you allow yourself to lose momentum. It could be a generation or more before you get something moving again. Take a look at how long it was between when we had the Black Wall Streets coming up at the end of the 19th century, and then how long it was before the Civil Rights Movement. That was over half a century. Do black people truly believe that we have the luxury of that kind of time now, when the competition couldn't be more fierce and the odds couldn't be more against us? No, we do not. Every black person within the sound of my voice is supposed to be a single cell of black empowerment. You're not supposed to be waiting for somebody to come and hold you by the hand. I'm going to hold you by the hand and pat you on the back and burp you like a baby, and we're going to spoon feed you every little thing. No. You're supposed to have a strong mind. I mean, for God's sake, we're dropping these jewels all over the place. We need black folks to pick them up and run with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I hear the argument, or I hear this. Well, I hear this when I hear people talking, and it's this notion of, I knew it wasn't going anywhere, but I still had to tell them how I felt. And I keep hearing that in our argument, like, it's not going anywhere, but let me just get it out because, I need to be heard, and I need to be, it's me, it's me. It's not me. I appreciate what you just said. Really, that that humbles me, but it shows me that there's not enough people out here standing up and speaking. I mean, essentially everybody in this room, however big their platform is, they should be very comfortable at least knowing that we're owed a debt and knowing who owes us the debt. But I have people right now still asking me questions about, well, how much? And they're trying to make it make sense, when we don't do all of this Chinese math, pun intended, when it comes to all of these other groups who get resources from the government. And I just I just feel like it's because they're trying to dodge the accountability bullet. And I I'm the same way because I don't necessarily like to be called out, but it wasn't until I was called out by people who have something more to say than me that I looked at me like, okay, let's kind of backtrack and rewind and start again. But it's it's the logic behind it. And I think that because they know we're not a thinking people, or at least we've grown to be a very comfortable non-thinking people, um, it it leads us to a place of no standards, and people are so afraid of standing up because maybe they were told they were too loud. Like, I think about just people in general and how they rear their children, and a lot of our fire was beaten out of us, like literally, whether it's an epigenetic memory that they have from our torture and enslavement, or a more recent memory of being a recipient of the belt. Like, standards are all out of whack, but here we are. You got
Well, when it comes to reparations, the main thing we need to remember is like that movie Goodfellas. Remember what Henry Hill said? He said the mob did not care what your excuses were. When it came time for you to pay your protection money, you paid up. My kid died, F you, pay me. My place burned down, F you, pay me. The doctor said I got 3 days to live, F you, pay me. That's the exact same standard that we have to have when it comes to what we're owed. We're not debating this, and we're not asking politely. Black folks have never gotten anything by asking politely except for an excuse. If we show people that basically we're sitting here being very nice, oh please, I hope that if you'll consider what it is that we're saying, they look and go, they on some BS, they ain't serious. But when black folks make it clear we're getting in your face and that there will be repercussions for not doing what's right, then all of a sudden they move. Look at what happened in 2020. We spent years with the white media telling lie after lie, saying, oh, it's all about qualified immunity. It's qualified immunity, you see. If we could just get some laws passed, just some laws. It's the legislature's hands. And then what happened in 2020? People got turned up. You had the police who felt the heat, and you had the DAs who felt the heat. That crooked DA up there in Hennepin County, who didn't want to have to go after those cops who murdered George Floyd, the folks made the block hot. And he had to relocate for a little while. And next thing you know, we were able to see people get indicted. People were actually getting charged. And it's been happening consistently, not to the level it should, but it started happening. Now, how many laws got changed? How many new laws got written that made that happen? Is qualified immunity struck down? Of course it's not. It's still on the books. And yet the cops are actually getting charged and punished. Now, what does that tell you? What that tells you is they're just running game. Just seeing if we're going to be nice enough to fall for the okie doke. And when we showed that we weren't, all of a sudden, they caught a case of act right. The exact same thing is happening when it comes to our reparations, when it comes to the tangibles that we're owed. And by the way, on a side note, I want to make it very clear. Reparations happens to be part of tangibles. Even if slavery had never happened, we would still be entitled to our tangibles because that's part of what citizenship entails. The entire reason that you have a government is not for the sake of confiscating money from you. They're supposed to be getting the money so they can do things for the people. That's how it works for everybody else. You take money out of these communities, they put money back into them. Hell, a large part of those suburbs were actually built with money that came from the inner city. They had black folks in the inner city basically subsidizing the white enclaves that were being built in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s. But then they made up their minds, we're not supposed to get any part of that. We got to be bold about what's owed to us, because justice is not a request, it is a demand. And you don't do it with pastel colors and do it by, I hope the other guy doesn't feel put upon. No, you want him to feel uncomfortable. A criminal is supposed to feel uncomfortable. A thief is supposed to feel uncomfortable. We don't want to seem like we're punishing them. What are you talking about? Justice requires a strong element of retribution. We got to get comfortable with that concept. This is not about making friends. This is about making progress. This is not about getting likes on the internet. It's about getting what we are due. Every other group operates that way. You go talking to those unions. You see those white boys in those unions coming to people and asking nicely. I mean, speaking of the intersection of politics and entertainment, they got like a strike going on in Hollywood right now. The actors are on strike, or the writers, or somebody's on strike. And you don't see them saying, well, let's go ask the studios politely and see if they'll give us some more money. They said, no, pay us. And you got some people trying to say, well, the studios are doing bad right now. They've been losing a lot of money. You hear what those unions are saying? They're saying, F you, pay us. Well, I mean, we're not really getting profits like we used to. F you, pay us. Well, you know, if some of these movies really have bombed at the box office, F you, pay us. See, everybody else operates like that. They don't want to hear any chitter chatter. They don't want to hear any excuses. And that's why they get what they want. And when Black people make it very clear, we're not trying to make you comfortable, we're trying to make you pay, then guess what? We're going to start getting some results too. We've seen that in recent history. And we can make that the new normal, but we got to make up our minds that we're not going to care who doesn't like it. You'll be amazed how much progress you can make when that's your standard.
Powerful. Man, powerful. Positions of power. Look, our country is arguably the world's superpower, right? As in, everyone fights to come over here, like I was saying earlier, and wings of airplanes and on hoods of cars and all of that stuff. But um, we've got these laws already on the books that are for us, and we're not doing anything with them, or at least we weren't doing anything with them. And now we're in a time where actions have consequences, good or bad. We can do this the easy way or we can do this the easier way. And I'm hopeful that a critical mass is brewing, because the easy way means that everybody kind of gets what they want. It's not this self destruct on, it's not the Babylon falling thing that everybody wants us to fail. Even people who are here from failing areas, they don't want us to succeed. They want to be the givers of the crumbs. They don't really want to change the status quo. They just want to be above us in the totem pole. And it's tough, right?
Well, sister, there's something I want to add because you got me thinking. One of the things that needs to be remembered among Black folks is, and let's be bluntly honest here, there's a lot of Black people who actually hope that white supremacy doesn't fall. If white supremacy were to fall tomorrow, there's a hell of a lot of Negroes who would starve.
Yes.
There are a lot of Black folks who, if white supremacy collapsed tomorrow, they wouldn't have what it takes to get out of bed in the morning. They wouldn't know what to do. There would be just a whole bunch of these Negroes who have been eating off of white supremacy, or at least who have been hoping for white supremacy's crumbs to be there, and they would not even know what to do, just the basics of what comes next. A lot of them don't want the responsibility that comes along with self-determination. As far as they're concerned, it's far easier to live under white mommy and white daddy. You can nurse off a white mommy, and some of them want to be nursing off a white daddy. I'll let you make of that what you will. But there's a whole bunch of Black folks who, if white supremacy fell tomorrow, they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. And those who do know, they don't like that idea. They want to be like little children. They want it for white mommy and white daddy to do the adult responsibility stuff, the whole running the world thing and running your life. And me, well, I'll just do my 8 and hit the gate. And I'll be dodging the cops and hoping that they don't come for me today. Because it's easier. But it's not easier. It's just an easy way to die. It's an easy way to live a life of struggle. It's an easy way to see your children live lives that are worse than yours were. So that's part of the issue that we got. A lot of Black folks who secretly hope that white supremacy stays standing. Not just because it's the only thing they've ever known, but because when they look at us, those of us in Black empowerment land, I'm not feeding any of these tethers. I'm not feeding any of these bootlicks. There's not a coon who's going to get a crumb from me. None of them. I'll see their stomachs touch their backbones before I give them a one crumb. Not going to happen. And they know that.
Absolutely. And they're cowards, right? Or they're the opposition. But the coward understands that they have nothing to pass down. And that's something that I've gotten from the new Black media. And as I'm not a coward and I do have minis to pass something down to, if we're never given what's owed to us, what do I pass down? Because the reality is that whatever I acquire, it could be gone next generation. And then I think about like Malcolm and Martin and their offspring. Like, imagine not being a coward and rearing children, and then because of white supremacy, racism, your children are buck broken into being quiet. Like, how does that happen? Like, Bernice King, how does that happen? I, I don't know that you come from such a powerful source, and that didn't matter unless it really did matter. And then the fact that it really did matter, that's why they're so focused on making sure that the message is disconnected. It's disjointed. It skips a generation. Because I find that talking with my grandparents and people in their age group, they still have a lot of fire. They just, like you said, they didn't have anybody to pass it on to. But I find that that's a self-inflicted wound, because it seems like they didn't want their children to struggle. They wanted it to be comfortable for them. All of what they had to go through, they didn't want that for their children. So they they bit the bullet. They work their 10 hours a day at the warehouse or at the factory or whatever. They retire and they're able to pass down, a house and, something to their family. And then that generation tricks it off. And now we're starting all over again. But other
Yeah,
groups
that's
don't
the
have
problem.
that.
We keep starting from zero over and over again. Every generation has to start from nothing over and over again. Now, a large part of those problems happen to be some that we saddled ourselves with. There has been a little bit of institutional dysfunction on that front, and there's no need in discounting that because that is part of the equation. It is there. But a large part of the problem, the bulk of the problem, happens to be that we're not in control of the economics of the areas that we live in. That's why I did that video briefing talking about the black farmers. And the most important point of that video happened to be that at the beginning of the 20th century, black farmers had over 20 million acres of land. And by the end of the 20th century, by 1997, black farmers only had about 2 to 3 million. That was an enormous amount of land that got taken away from black farmers. It wasn't that they didn't pass it on to their children, it's that they were systematically targeted to be disenfranchised and impoverished. This was something that was done to us. And this is part of what we keep tabs on as far as what it is that we're owed. Because we don't want anyone thinking to themselves, oh, this stuff stopped. That's one of the big lies that they say. Oh, it was a long time ago. It was a long time ago. I wasn't part of slavery. Yeah, but you were here when black farmers were being raped of their property. You were here when you had places like the University of Georgia taking black people's land back in the 1960s from them. That wasn't in 1860. That was in the 1960s. I mean, just a few years ago, you had some banks out in California who actually got charged by Joe Biden's Justice Department, believe it or not, of redlining. We talk about redlining as an artifact of the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. It's still going on today. And we ain't even talking about places like Texas or Florida, these little reprobate red state enclaves. We're talking about in liberal California. They're doing redlining in liberal California. And that was just the one bank that they caught. So let's not talk about the things that we've endured as being past tense. Whenever talking about what's happened to us, always speak about it present tense because it hasn't stopped. It's still going on.
You're absolutely right. That's an excellent point. I will definitely be adopting that into my lexicon because it's important to know that it's not antiquated. The same way that they show us pictures of Martin, and they're all black and white, so they want you to think that it was a very long time ago. They're really good with distorting the timeline. And I guess that affects me a little bit harder than I thought it did.
Image training. That's one of the things that I talked about recently, that the military talks about image training, associating imagery with certain words or certain themes. And what happens is people become indoctrinated. It's a soft-core way of brainwashing. But when people see that stuff, they think, oh, yeah, this happened way the hell back. And it conflates the idea. 1960s, 1860s. Oh, it was just so long ago. What are you talking about? You were like in college or high school when that happened. But that's the whole point. That's how they very subtly use imagery to tell you lies. That's why I usually call it lying images and phony narratives. They can make images lie to you. What's that old saying? Believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. Right. But when it comes to the white media, you better make it more like believe 1/4 of what you see. And even then, you better ask some questions.
That part. I think about, well, I'm always thinking about the minis, the children, because it's not about, well, I have children. I don't know about you, but for me, it's not about me anymore. It's about them. And a lot of us don't want to get out of the way to make it about them. But it is the programming of it all that you spoke about earlier. They have legit psychologists and shrinks on these children's shows, with the script and making sure that the message and the agenda is subtle, like you said. They want it to be subliminal, and that way they can't say that uh, they were so forceful about it. It's not like you're seeing the public displays of affection of, people that you don't want to see in the grocery store as much as you see Gonzo wearing a Cinderella dress, because everybody knows Cinderella and everybody knows who Gonzo is from the Muppets, and it's all very benign. But it's not, because like you said, the children are watching it and that adults are not supervising, and now you've given your mini to the devil. to be programmed. Like, we're supposed to be programming them. It's very selfish, but if they are a blank template, then isn't it our job to make sure that they have what they need? Like, we're not supposed to give that away. But you've got drop off parents. I'm also an educator, so I don't necessarily see it a lot at the school that I teach at now, but the school that I was at before, a lot of parents don't have the time, or they don't care to have the time or make the time to impress upon their children what is necessary. A lot of children going on trips with members of the dominant society and not coming back, and the parents are all looking stupid, like they didn't know that Jenny, Becky, Sally, and Jesse were not really rocking with their, with their kid. And now everybody's all confused about why Keisha didn't come back from the slumber party. Well, Keisha's dead because, those parents and those people didn't really care about her, and they were never going to care about her. But you gave her up, and for what? Like, I don't know what the trade-off is there, other than people don't want to be accountable for the programming. When your kid grows up and they're like, man, it's my mom's fault that I'm like this. They do that for the bad stuff, but they don't do it for what they consider good stuff. I don't know a lot of parents who are like me. I mean, I'm meeting a lot of like-minded individuals on this app and in real life because of these conversations. But before then, parents are real cool talking about Santa Claus. And then they're real cool about, oh yeah, I knew you knew I was lying to you, but it's okay because it's all part of growing up. Like, what is that? Like, you're just telling your children to accept the fact that you lied to them, and it's okay because you lied to them, but they're not supposed to accept when other people lie to them. Like, you're setting them up for these uncomfortable conversations as adults, or at least there's no power there because everybody's stuck on stupid.
Yeah, we got too many black parents out there who want to parent by remote control, and it's sad because you see it every day. But part of the problem happens to be that you got people offering up their children as human sacrifices, and that's what it amounts to. They don't want to hear it, but that's what it is. And a lot of them, I guess they're still on that nonsense about we can be accepted by proxy. Okay, I didn't get accepted back in the 1960s when they were integrating, where you got Gen X parents. We weren't really accepted during the 70s and 80s and into the 90s, or what have you. So now you got some people who are Gen X parents or Gen Z, or even millennials, and they're trying to figure out, well, can we get accepted now? And the main people who need to be accepting you are yourselves. Black people need to be accepting themselves. We have to accept ourselves. And then once you do that, you're not going to be wasting your time looking around for all these friends, because you'll realize that you got something far better than friends. You got family. And when we decide that that's what we're going to get back to, a whole lot of these problems and dysfunction, as you put it, confusion, a lot of that stuff is going to start getting sorted out. Anyway, Sister Eve, I hate to bomb and go, but I do have something I got to take care of right now. But I want to thank you for having invited me to this Twitter space. By the way, family, for everyone in the sound of my voice, you guys don't know this, but Sister Eve, she has been trying for the last year at least to try to get me on a Twitter space. I have never done one before. And truth be told, I wasn't keen on it, but she just stayed on my case and said, "Sister Truth, you got some time." And she just stayed on me till finally I said, I'll do it just to get her to stop. But no, I've actually enjoyed this, and I promised myself that I would, because I do need to start engaging with the family outside of the video essays that I do, and I want to make a greater concerted effort at that. But I'm proud of the fact that I was able to. You are the first non-YouTube or non-Skype dialogue that I've had. This is the first time I've done a space on Twitter, and it's not going to be the last time. So the family should be glad. She was the one who dragged me kicking and screaming to do it.
I appreciate you. I really do.
I appreciate the work that you've put in. Like I said, we're going to need rock-ribbed people who are every bit as dedicated to what we're doing as we are. Anyone who thinks that one generation alone is going to get this set, that's just living in a dream world. You had everything from the 1920s, when you had the first origins of Marcus Garvey, what he was doing, all the way up until the end of the 1960s. That was 3 generations of work. But it got undone dang near in a single day. And then you had people like Dr. John Henrik Clarke and Dr. Ben and others who were still trying to pull that wagon. But you had everybody else just sitting down thinking, oh, you go ahead and pull that wagon, you'll be okay. That ain't going to work. This is going to be a generational effort. But then again, we should be comfortable with that. Black empowerment is a lifestyle. You're going to be fighting for your power every day, but you can either fight on your knees or you can get on your feet and start swinging some blows. I think we all know what side everybody in this room stands on. So, sister, I want to thank you very much for having had me here. We are going to get together and do this again soon.
Definitely. Definitely. Much respect to you, Professor. Thank you so much for joining me, and good night.
You're very welcome, sister. Be one.
Look, I can't give enough credit to the New Black Media because it is news that you can use. I mean, it's for us. And in 2023, we're checking paperwork. What did you do today to further our cause? What will you do tomorrow? What have you accomplished? Really? No, really. What is your legacy?